Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, and in that capacity, I am the Director of the Boston Art Commission, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the June meeting of the Boston Art Commission, and we'll get started. We're getting started in just a moment. I think we're pulling up our slides. Thank you. And as an introduction, I am joined by the Boston Art Commission staff. Thank you. Working within the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, Sarah Rodrigo, our Public Art Project Manager, and Trisha Gilrain, Collections Manager, will be helping to facilitate this meeting. The Boston Art Commission, staffed by the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, is an independent board composed of 9, though we currently have 8, appointed art and design professionals that hold public meetings to review and vote on matters concerning the city's art collection. Meetings are held the second Tuesday of each month to review current public art projects cited on or proposed for City of Boston property. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting virtually. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the Boston Art Commission, the public may access this meeting through telephone and video conferencing. I will now hand it over to Chair Mark Pasnick, who will call the meeting to order and go over some further instruction. Mark, I think you may be muted.
Sorry about that. I gave a rousing welcome to everybody, and I'll repeat that. We're really excited to see some of the proposals that are coming before us today. I wanted to welcome everyone first and then call the meeting to order. It's now 4:02 p.m. Today, the Commission will be holding a public meeting. Next slide. I wanted to take a roll call of the commissioners first. I'm obviously present. Equa Holmes.
Equa Holmes here.
Camilo.
Camilo's here.
Michael. I think Michael's not here. Okay. Cara.
Here.
George.
I'm here.
Robert.
Here.
Sorry, and Lisa.
Here.
Great, so we have a quorum. Next slide, please. The Commission and staff wish to provide some instruction on using the platform effectively to offer questions and comment, and we'll go through that in further detail, but I will, as the next slide, just make mention of a few key points. To this. As with regular BAC meetings, project partners and members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comments on items the Commission will vote on. After presentations and commissioners clarifying questions, I will invite public to make comment at the appropriate times. Please remember to keep your comments brief and on topic, Karen will be providing more detailed instruction on how to make comments when we get closer to the time periods where comments are allowed. Next slide. We'll begin with just taking a look at the overview of the publicly posted agenda. Next. This is the first half of the agenda, so the next slide will also include a portion of the agenda. It will begin with the director's report, and then we will have 2 public art presentations for vote today. Please note that we have moved the King Memorial MOU discussion to the end of the report so that our counsel, Nyla Freeman, can join us for that discussion. I will also be recusing myself from that discussion, and Equa Holmes will take over. And then next page. This is the end of that agenda, which includes items for review. Part 3 includes items for review, testimony, and commission vote. So that's the chance when the public will be able to weigh in with any comments. Okay. I would like to take now the moment to review and vote on the minutes from the May session. So what I'll do is ask for a motion to accept the minutes if everybody's had a moment to review them ahead of time. And then we'll need a second, and then I'll do a roll call asking each commissioner to vote yes or no. So has everybody had a chance to review them ahead of time?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Is there a motion on the floor?
I move that we
approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, so first, I vote yes. Equa,
Aqua Holmes, yes.
Camilo,
Yes.
Michael is not here. Cara,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
and Lisa.
Yes.
Great, so the motion passes. Next up, we'll have Karen Goodfellow give her director's report.
Hi again, everybody. We are going to start with a statement that was released by the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture on June 1st. This statement was a collaborative effort by Cara Elliott Ortega and some of our other colleagues. And I would like to give a moment to Cara to read this statement, for us to share it. We have it up here on the slide, and also go over a few other points about the work the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture is doing now.
Thanks, Karen. So this statement was crafted last week in response to the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and the resulting protests and demonstrations across the country and in Boston, calling for police reform and the valuing of Black lives. And I'm just going to read what you see on the screen. As we work to make Boston a more equitable city, we must be accountable and recognize the way racism is replicated in our own work through the systemic marginalization of Black artists and Black stories in Boston's arts and culture sector. Remaining silent is not an option, and there is no neutral. We urge all of our cultural organizations, institutions, and spaces to consider their role in upholding racist policies and ask that we all recommit to action. Commit to policies that support arts administrators of color and create real opportunities for advancement. Hire artists of color with fair pay and treatment. Commission works that tell non-white and anti-colonial stories. Decentralize Western and European narrative and practices. Identify women and minority-owned businesses for local sourcing opportunities, and more. We must put into practice the belief that our fates are linked and truly and honestly move forward together. I think we can go to the next slide. And so just to share a really quick overview of the equity work that we do have underway in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, the first piece is an internal equity process for our staff, just within the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. We've been working toward this for over a year now and selected a consultant for that work about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And we'll be starting a 9-month process, internal process, next week, actually. So the goal of that work is to engage in racial equity trainings as a team, including understanding ways that inequity and racism play out in the arts sector and in our own work. We hope to come out of that process with an updated mission statement for the office, as well as internal work plans to track accountability towards agreed upon equity goals that we come to through that process. The city is also engaging in a consultant for racial equity trainings. This is a result of a mandate from the mayor requiring all employees to receive racial equity training. So I wanted to highlight that. That's also been an ongoing process. David Leonard and I are both helping with the consultant review, the RFP review that's going through the process right now to select a consultant to bring those trainings to City of Boston employees. And then lastly, in response to what we were hearing last week from the arts and culture sector, we decided to partner with the Boston Foundation and Arts Connect International to launch what is being called the Cultural Equity Learning Community. This is an anti-racist, go-at-your-own-pace learning program that's going to provide wraparound learning support in the form of panels and peer support and discussion groups. And this is really geared specifically toward staff and leadership at predominantly white institutions that want to engage in racial equity work for themselves and for their organizations. And we have a statement of interest for that program that's open now, and maybe Trisha or anybody who has access to sharing that in the chat could share a link to that for everybody who's on the call. And that was also in response to, I think, what felt to a lot of people like the lip service of a lot of organizations doing things like what we just did, which was releasing a statement about what we're up to and kind of stating our commitment. And a lot of people saying, okay, well, where's the action? And then also a lot of white staff and white organizations reaching out to funders, to the city, to their Black colleagues, trying to figure out how to move forward, and feeling like we needed to provide something for people to just do work that they need to take on themselves, and that there's plenty of work for people to do, particularly if they've never engaged with that before. And so that's really what that cultural equity learning community is. It's a way to support taking first steps and really examining that for people, again, as individuals or within their organizations. And so that's all kind of table setting for this group, for the Art Commission, because there's definitely a role for the Art Commission to play and for us to think about in terms of what is happening with public art, what we're commissioning, what is in the collection. And so we look forward to the Art Commission's partnership and moving toward those goals and continuing that conversation. So appreciate the time to just share that. And I think Karen has more information to share in the agenda.
Kara, can I ask you, is the RFP selection closed now, or is it still open for the?
It's closed now. It's in the, we're evaluating what was submitted.
Okay, thank you.
And Car, you asked Trisha to share the cultural equity learning community.
Yeah, the link should be in the, at the bottom in the notes of the slide,
right,
if it's possible to share that.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, can we get next slide? Oh, actually, no. Yes, thank you. So as Kara went over in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture statement, our office is asking cultural organizations to consider their role in upholding racist policies and ask that we all recommit to action. So my hope was that in response to this national and this time of national and international protests and local community conversations, we might take a moment today to consider the Art Commission's role in creating anti-racist policies and the role that we have in our hiring processes of artists, as well as telling stories forming the narrative of Boston. The Commission developed its curatorial mission some years ago to begin to guide us in this work. And we have developed standard policies and procedures with hope for creating more transparency and consistency in our practices, or to at least give us clarity as a starting place in doing so. However, as an office, we've been concerned with critically examining our artist selection processes for newly commissioned permanent works in particular. And we believe we must continue to examine our work from a commissioning and curatorial lens, including project selections, scoping, calls to artists, selection criteria, applications, and artist selection. And all of this, before necessarily things come to our public meeting. So we will continue to do that work, and this is work we may begin to examine through some of the internal work plans and equity work that Cara discussed for the office, but these are conversations we've been having for some time, but we hope to move forward with them with greater urgency. The statement from our office also asks us to commission works that tell non-white and anti-colonial stories to decentralize Western and European narratives and practices. However, our role as the Art Commission and our responsibilities include not only commissioning new works, but also caring for, examining, and interpreting the existing collection. Next slide, please. And to that end, I thought it would be a good time for us to return to this report. In 2018, those of you who were with the commission at that time might remember that we commissioned BU graduate student Eva Medichik to conduct an assessment of the city's permanent collection through an equity lens. And she delivered a report entitled An Opportunity for Change, discussing monuments in Boston and beyond. This report has been shared with all of you, and it is also linked to, for anyone watching, into the agenda that was posted publicly on boston.gov. So if you haven't had a chance, it's a fairly long report to spend time with that. I think we'll be doing so more in the future. Next slide. So in this report, the goals were spelled out, and they were to provide a concise summary of the current debate about monuments in the United States, including an overview of how other cities have dealt with this issue, to examine Boston's commemorative landscape and provide a summary of objects that are or may become controversial, and to begin a conversation on how to address these issues. This includes small adjustments like changing language found in the online database, proposing additional information, interpretive materials on site, or imagining alternative interventions. Next slide. The report had two parts. One was instructive about what was happening at that time, or had been happening in the recent years nationally. So part one was Beyond Boston, the national dialogue surrounding monuments, equity, and public space. And this selection this section of the report provided a summary of current debate about monuments in the United States and an overview of how other cities have tackled this issue. Part 2 was starting a conversation about Boston's commemorative landscape. And this section of the report provided a consideration of how the BAC's curatorial mission fits into this conversation. In particular, how do the aims of engaging communities, enriching and enlivening the urban environment, enhancing diversity, and responding directly to a specific environment correspond to debates about commemorative public art. Additionally, a summary of 6 local monuments that are in some way controversial or offer opportunities to engage with problematic histories. So as you might see if you read through the report, the 6 local monuments were the Christopher Columbus Monument in Christopher Columbus Park in the North End, the Samuel Eliot Morrison piece on the ComAv Mall, Emancipation Group at Park Plaza, the Founders Memorial on the Boston Common, the Boston Common Tablet on the Boston Common, the Francis Parkman Memorial at Jamaica Pond. And additionally, the report states that the 6 Boston monuments examined here are by no means a complete catalog of objects that beg closer critical attention. For example, next on the list are the John Endicott Monument and the Irish Famine Commemoration, both of which have drawn criticism during their time as part of the city's commemorative landscape. Indeed, a truly comprehensive approach would allow for members of the public to a dialogue that the public to contribute their own observations and suggestions of monuments that need recontextualization, spark interest, or may even someday require removal. The conversations that can come out of a public dialogue can only strengthen the city's efforts to make progress on racial equity and create an ecosystem that supports and celebrates art and culture for all Bostonians. And in the next slide, you can see 2 of the works that were highlighted by Eva as problematic, which have been of recent interest. While the vandalism in the Columbus sculpture on the left image was done in 2015, this image has been shared widely in recent days as a protest of white supremacy. And this is something that has happened more than once. And so I think it is of interest to the commission to listen to the sort of activities around a piece and understanding how the community of Boston feels about artworks in our collection. And this piece is attributed to Andrew J Mazzola. It was originally installed in 1979 in Christopher Columbus Park in the North End of Boston. And though the sculpture is attributed to Mazzola, we don't have great documentation of this in the art file. However, it was purchased from Mazzola Monument Works in Norwood, Massachusetts. And the image on the right, you might recognize as John Endicott outside of the Museum of Fine Arts. And that photo was actually taken by Sarah today. We had a meeting at Madison Park for a mural that we'll be hoping to see forward soon. And she noticed this, the markings, the spray paint that were on the piece. So again, these are public, I think, messages for us to listen to, in particular as these works have been previously identified by us through that report as problematic. If we go to the next slide, there's been not only conversations from the past, but there have been reconsideration of collections across the country and internationally just in the last week or 2. Here are some current examples of what is happening across the country in regards to the decommissioning of statues. These articles are current, both of them are from June and demonstrate current initiatives to remove racist monuments. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam announced that they will be clearing the city of Confederate monuments. And in Syracuse, over 6,000 people have signed a petition for the removal of a Christopher Columbus statue. And in our next slide, we can see other examples of, from the past weeks on removals. And 2 of these are of 2 artworks in Philadelphia memorializing the late Mayor Frank L. Rizzo, who had a reputation which embraced law and order as mayor. He was commissioner for the Philadelphia Police Department from 1968 to 1971. When he resigned to run for mayor, he won that election and served. As you can see, he this is one of the more recent situations where we have seen, so this is not just newer, older works in collections or historic pieces, but also from things from recent history. And on the top right, you can see a bronze portrait of Edward Carlston by John Cassidy in Bristol, England, which was erected in 1895. So an example of an older historic piece that has long been a focal point for anger at the city's role in the slave trade and the continued commemoration of those who were involved in it. Carlston's company transported more than 100,000 slaves from West Africa to the Caribbean and the Americas between 1672 and 1689, cramming them into ships to maximize profit. A petition to remove it had garnered more than 11,000 signatures. It said, whilst history shouldn't be forgotten, these people who benefited from the enslavement of individuals do not deserve the honor of this statue. This should be reserved for those who bring about positive change and who fight for peace, equality, and social unity. It was removed by local citizens this week and relocated to the harbor. You can also see at the bottom right, a 12-foot statue of Texas Rangers Captain Jay Banks that was in Dallas Airport, and tribute to the state's investigative force. The statue, which stood at the airport since 1962 and was captured one riot, one ranger. The removal of the statue was prompted in part by local officials' reactions to the book Cult of Glory, The Bold and Brutal History of the Texas Rangers by Doug J. Swanson. The book, which is to be released on Tuesday, tells of racial incidents involving the Rangers, including Banks' role in keeping Black students from enrolling at a Dallas area high school and a community college in East Texas. And so in sharing these examples, our intention is just to show how lively this conversation is across the country and how there is examination by local people of the collection. So this is something that people throughout Boston are thinking about and throughout the country, and as well as internationally. And so I wanted to bring us back to that report for further conversation and just offer it to all of you for public dialogue.
So you're partly opening up to conversation among the commission, correct? And I'll begin with, I think there's another set of issues that we should also be addressing is at some point we've done a report on the specifics of our collection in terms of its current situation and evolving collection in terms of what stories it is telling. And, I remember a few years back that something like, I should say 80 or 90% of the works were about white men over history, and very few were about other citizens of our city. So that's also an ongoing question of what, how are we adapting our collection to more fully reflect the diversity of the city that we are today.
Aaron, I have a kind of a controversial view of removing statues. My feeling is that we keep statues and reframe the plaques and the information that goes on the statues. Many of these statues are being removed, which have been there for many, many years, but the information on them has not been very accurate. And so I'm just one voice in thinking about how to readdress how the statues should inform the public.
Bob, in previous conversations we've had about this issue, surrounding a few of these pieces in particular, we were discussing multiple methods depending on the piece. Mm-hmm. Some of it is contextualizing it with more information. Some of it might be actually encouraging dialogue through a temporary artwork that engages with the existing work in sight. Right. Some of it might be putting a counterpoint in some other method. Lastly, some of it would be consideration of a removal or relocation of a work, either to, probably not the harbor. I did like how drawly you mentioned the relocation of that work, but to either a museum or another context in which it could be better interpreted. I think for most of us, the last resort is complete, not just decommission, but destruction of a work. That's something that we would probably encourage avoiding, but there are many ways to consider changing the public's understanding of the work. And some of those are removal, some of those are other techniques as well.
Well, I would just say that I definitely agree with a multiple strategy, because I think making a blanket decision about these different projects would be insensitive. And the fact is that we do have multiple things that we can do. I would love for my granddaughter, for instance, to understand what some of these monuments used to be and what they used to mean in her city. If they're all removed with no explanation, then that's a part of history that will be hard for her to recover. So I hope that we can look at each project individually and bring our best creative, innovative selves to the strategies.
These monuments hold history, and so therefore it's an incredible opportunity for further dialogue. The same processes that brought us these monuments will probably have to reenact them, to amend them, to remove them, what have you. I think we should probably think about a call for how to reassess these monuments from the public.
I think that's a great idea, and I'd actually encourage us to maybe to prioritize action in a logical way. I think, we had a fantastic conversation about this. We looked at a report that New York had done with their monuments. And I feel like now would be a good time to unearth those very specific sets of conversations. Maybe we would look at a particular set of works and start making active decisions. I think we've started the conversation a long time ago, but we haven't yet, moved to somewhere where we're actually asking some of the more specific, harder questions about what we should do with a particular work of art. So I wonder if we could start to put this on an agenda. And there's a number of works. It may not be, I'm not sure that it's best to take them all on at once, but maybe we could start to move into a clear-cut case or two to begin with, and then develop some strategies for the larger collection out of some real action.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting that some of the pieces that are being removed are just kind of like happening silently now. Like all of a sudden people are trying to pretend that they weren't put up in the first place, to the point of kind of recontextualizing. And so I think a question is also, what kind of public participation and dialogue needs to happen as a part of these? So I wonder if at a staff level, the next step is to kind of outline some of those different options for each, maybe for some of the pieces we know are at the top of the list, and look up some examples that I think we already know from that report of what those processes could look like, including some specifics around engagement. Because I think that's been one of the questions is like, there are some creative ways to do that by just having a public call for like, how would you want us to deal with this? Like really open-ended. Some of them are more creative. Some of them are actual like community meetings and facilitated conversations. And I think, there's a lot of paths there. So I feel like if we had a little bit more of a kind of menu of like, here's the world of possibilities, then maybe we could select one. Or if we feel like there's a strong enough case to just reinterpret something, and I could imagine coming to that decision as well. But do we need kind of like a menu of what direction to go in?
Yeah, and in addition to public engagement, it'd be great if we use this as an opportunity to commission an artist to, even if we're removing a work, to remove it artistically with perhaps some kind of experience or some kind of learning component through an artist's vision. I wonder if Boston Air has anybody from that group taken on? I mean, I know that we had one artist who was taking on a particular issue, but has there been any interest in their work with the city to delve into some of these topics?
There are artists involved, I think, who would be interested in this topic, who may be in attendance at the meeting today. I know Erin Jenny, I think I saw enter the meeting, and I know she's done writing about public art. she may be interested. We can ask her to possibly join us. I can speak to her, or if we open up to the public later, we can see if she has any thoughts or comments, or if anyone else does. I will say in the report, if you went through it, there are suggestions, possibilities, and opportunities sort of already listed for each of the 6 problematic pieces that she highlighted. So a lot of the work that we're saying should be done has been done. I think we can look at it. I think we might possibly at a training go over it in more detail. I think reading through the document and going through it carefully would be the next step before action. But in this report, as Cara mentioned, there's a study of the work that cities did in particular, and there are also nuanced suggestions for how to provide online contextualization, to partner with educational institutes, to commission temporary or permanent artworks, and to have greater educational initiatives around the pieces. So I think in sharing what's happening around the country, we're probably not seeing headlines about interpretation and contextualization in the same way, but I think to understand the moment that we're in and the consideration that collections are having, it's important to see what's happening. But I think we've been holding this report since 2018, so I'd enjoy continuing the conversation.
Aaron, can you send us a link to that report, the commissioners?
Yes, we'll resend that.
Thank you.
I think we have a great network with the museum education departments, which have been slashed in the past few months, but they have access to a lot of these K through 12 and high school and beyond educational programs.
Mark, I'd like to just point out that all of these pieces come on with a certain context that's not immediately available. And I'm thinking particularly of some research that's been done about statues of Christopher Columbus throughout the country, that they came on board when the Italian community reached a certain level of political power and social power. And so what they represent is not so much a Italian explorer, but the personal feelings of an entire community within each city.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of these are quite complex in terms of what they're showing and who they may be offending. So, I agree with Karen that there is some content, but it seems to me like we need to have a conversation about it and engage the public and then figure out a direction to go. Okay, are there any other commissioners want to make a comment? If there are other, Tricia, I don't know whether we could see if there's any questions from the community. We'll be addressing this, I think, much more vigorously in the future. But if there's any comments that somebody would like to make now, we'd welcome them.
I can leave 2 minutes to check the hand raising and the message. Currently, we have no hands raised and no messages coming in.
Okay. Well, I think we'll have a forum where we can speak to more people about this. Yes.
Sorry, we do have 1 hand raised, if that's all right.
Sure, of course.
Okay. Emma, please go ahead.
Hi there. Sorry, I was going to see if I could start a video so I'm not a disembodied voice, but thank you for the, first of all, for bringing this to the discussion today and just unearthing this report and creating some space for this conversation, which I think is incredibly important. I guess my comment is just that I would urge, as you all, whatever you decide to do, whether it's going back to that report and reviewing it and figuring out next steps from there, I think it's really critical that historians, broadly defined, are like part of whatever this conversation is going forward. I know that a lot of other cities that have convened these reports and commissions are thinking about like having a really diverse array of perspectives, and I think it's hard to disentangle the public art element of these works from the public history element of these works. So I would just kind of encourage that as a framing as you proceed. But thank you again for, bringing this really important issue into today's discussion.
And just for our record, could you state your full name too, just so we have
Oh, sure thing, sorry. My name is Emma Boast, and I work at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Great, thank you.
We have one more hand raised. Rochelle Brown. Rochelle, go ahead.
Rochelle, we can't hear you. Are you on mute? We're still not hearing you, Rochelle.
Yeah, I'm unable to unmute her.
Okay. Rochelle, unfortunately, some technical difficulties seem to be happening. We welcome your comments either via email or if you're able to sign on later, we could listen into you later.
She could also put her question or comment in the chat. If she
yeah.
I also have a comment from Lily Many Colors. Lily, do you want me to read your comment aloud? She says, I would like to encourage that the indigenous people of these lands be included in this topic and decisions made.
Great. Thank you everyone for the comments. And as I mentioned, I think we'll try to make this a more formal consideration in the future with further public engagement. And I think the constituencies that have been mentioned right now are certainly things that we would want to engage, including historians and indigenous people.
We also have a hand raised from Erin.
Erin, go ahead.
Hello, this is Erin Genia, and I'm a current Boston artist in residence. I want to thank you for holding this meeting today and for bringing this report, Karen, to our attention. Currently in my work, I am looking at public art and what that means in terms of colonial monuments and also indigenous space, and thinking of spatial justice. And so I'd be definitely interested in continuing to talk about this. And I just wanted to bring up one thing that through my research that I've found is that there are many different approaches that can be used to deal with looking at our problematic monuments. And yet at the same time, what also must be done around that is to examine the philosophies and the policies and the ways of thinking that put those monuments there in the first place, and how those things continue into the present day. So I think that that is work that needs to go along concurrently with the examination of the monument. So I think with any process that also has to be taken into consideration. And that goes right back to the statement, Karen, that you read earlier about how we can address institutionalized racism in our cultural institutions and in our institutions, our public institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. That's certainly, yeah, the bigger picture I think we have to address as well. Okay, so if there are no other hands raised, I think we can move to our next topic, knowing that we're going to be needing to spend a lot more time on this particular issue in the future. Karen, I think, are you reporting on conservation?
Right, sorry. Let me jump back in. So yes, I wanted to bring the attention of the commission to recent vandalism in the city's permanent collection. So next slide, or just damage to it. The plaque on Sam Adams was reported to be loose and has since been repaired. Tricia worked with Daedalus to resecure the plaque on the south side of the statue in Dock Square on Friday, June 5th, 2020. And so that work has been done. Additionally, the Matthew Hoffman piece, this may never end, I think it's called. I think there might be an extra this in the title we have here. Is a piece by Chicago-based artist Matthew Hoffman, and it was originally commissioned by the Rose Kennedy Greenway. The artwork is 4 foot by 312 feet. It's made of bright yellow, high-density polyethylene, and originally was exhibited on a fence between North and Clinton Streets in 2016. Here it's in its original location. The artwork was deinstalled in May of 2017. Next slide. The artwork was reinstalled on the fence along the south side of Lincoln Street between Franklin Street and Eric Road. And this is on a fence at the Massachusetts Turnpike Authority property. And this work was abbreviated from 312 feet to 162 feet. And as you see in the next slide, the piece has suffered from consistent vandalism. We have already repaired it in the past. These photographs were taken a couple weeks ago. We anticipate the repairs to be expensive and time consuming. There are changes coming to the site, and we might need to reconsider what we can expect in terms of the maintenance of the piece. You can see that here was not simply writing on the works, but the letters were taken down and rearranged in this case. And so we're working on these repairs to the piece now, but as we know there are changes happening there, we might need to look at another location. And if we do that, we might want to consider methods for reducing the costs of conservation in the future, including putting a different kind of bolt on the back so that they're harder to rearrange. Additionally, there was vandalism, next slide please, to the Puerto Rican Veterans Memorial. It was vandalized on May 24th. You may have seen this on the news. Tricia has been working with Commissioner Santiago, the Puerto Rican Veterans Association, a conservator, to assess the damage. One of the front pedestals was damaged, and the damage was attended to on May 25th by Property Management and Public Works. A conservator has assessed the memorial and will determine if further structural repairs are required. Lastly, there are various works in Back Bay. On May 31st, multiple artworks located on the Boston Common, Commonwealth Avenue were vandalized. Tricia is working with the Friends of the Public Garden and the Parks Department so that we have documentation of all the damage and treatment plans. And on the following slides, there's some examples. On these slides, you can see some of that. And so we've been working primarily with the Friends and with Daedalus, who is the same conservator, to clean the pieces. So on next slide, you can see our plans for conservation. We are looking for a house doctor. We are releasing a request for proposals. Tricia's been working on this RFP for public art conservation house doctor. The call is currently being reviewed by our Director of Finance as well as Corporation Counsel, and it is scheduled to be released on June 22nd with an applicant to be chosen in mid-July. A house doctor would be working with a predetermined budget and would help us help to develop a prioritized list of necessary projects. The contract would be 1 year with an option to renew annually. And this would help us in going forward in dealing with conservation and to have someone sort of on hand and with sort of allocated budget. And with that, we can move on to in-process public art.
I did have one question for you,
Sure.
Karen. Was there any, I read in the Globe about some of the vandalism that there were public volunteers trying to clean it off themselves. So have we had any issues surrounding that, or is not using the proper methods, for instance, has that been avoided, or is that still an issue that we have to consider?
Tricia, can you speak to that?
Yep, I spoke to Sarah Hutt, and they did encounter some of these situations, but Daedalus has gone back and determined any kind of retroactive treatment that the pieces may need because of this. I can only speak right now to the common and the public garden in that respect, but I can follow up if any other scenarios come before me.
Okay, were there any other questions? Okay. If not, then we can move ahead to the next slide. On April 24th, we released a call for proposals for transformative public art projects. The call closed on May 13th, and we received 44 applications. You can see here that in the next slide, some of the language that we used in the call. In consideration of COVID-19, we were looking to provide creative approaches to public connections and community rituals, and that we were looking for projects that may have been web-based or include virtual reality. We were also open to more traditional media or pieces that were interior, but we were specifically interested in projects that really spoke to our current sense of place and interrelatedness, and for ways for people to connect under current conditions and to reimagine public conditions. And we are excited to share some of those projects with you now. Next slide. So we had given grants out in 2 categories. One was for now grants. Those are projects to be completed before September 30th. And for those, we had 3 different levels. We offered $1,000, $2,500, and $5,000. And we had a second category of later grants, understanding the amount of stress that people are under now. We thought there may be desire for some artists to receive a little bit of funding to spend time on research and development. So we gave out grants of $500 to those artists. And you can see some images here on the right for some of the projects, which includes a project. You can see the top left one, which includes finger knitting. The top right one is, projections onto the strand, projects including plants. So we had various different kinds of projects brought to us that we wouldn't normally see in our traditional understanding of public art. We asked all grantees to submit a short video about their project as acceptance of the grant. On the next slide, we have a video from Lily Shee and Crystal B. Wagner, who received a $5,000 NOW grant for their video, Chinatown Story Cart. I don't know if we're able to play this video for you. Oh, if we aren't able to play them, we will be sharing them publicly soon. I don't think the audio is coming through. Okay, well, we will share these with you soon. So if we can skip ahead, past the videos.
Karen, is there a posted list of the people who?
We will be posting it. We haven't sent out the press release yet.
Okay.
And also related to the Transformative Public Art Grant, in the past we had specifically been looking for social practice works or murals in particular. And 2 of the murals that we had commissioned last year, you might remember, were supposed to be implemented in the fall, but it got really cold really early last fall. seems very far away now. But on the left, we see the design for Back to Essence by Victor Marco 27 Quinones at 95 Magazine Street in Newmarket. And on the right, the design for Breathe Life 2 by Rob Proglack Gibbs at Madison Park Technical Vocational High School. And both of those will be completed in the very near future. We're working with them to find safe ways to do so. But both of those should be happening very soon. Okay, thank you. And then very quickly, under administrative, we just have a couple things. So we were just gonna touch on in relation to the Transformative grant that our definition of public art has been shifting, and just, you know, wanted to bring back into conversation as well, like our curatorial vision, our understanding of what public art is in terms of what we have in our policy. And another thing that we might want to return to is, you know, expanding what our concept of public art is as we move forward under COVID-19, taking the lessons that we're learning and potentially expanding the work that we do even after restrictions may lift. The restrictions are something that we're taking very seriously for the safety of artists. So we have been working on some guidelines for public art during COVID-19, and we'll just very quickly show you what we're sharing publicly. So you can see that we have a draft of both single artist guidelines and guidelines for artists who are working with a team. So we have been working with the mayor's office on having these reviewed and in a shareable form, but we have been starting to discuss these with artists that we're working with now. And we imagine that we'll be going forward with them publicly in the next couple of weeks in order to protect artists from harm from COVID, and also to think through the needs artists might have when working on the street. In particular, if an artist is working with graffiti, we have concerns that someone might call the police, that there might be sort of an alarm caused by seeing them, and that if there is a racist passerby, they might cause harm to the artist that we've tasked with working on public art. And so we feel like it is our responsibility to provide more security, and we have a process developing and trying to think through how do we better direct public concern to something like 311 or the city website. How do we better engage with the public and educate them about current projects that we have going? So how do we sort of take responsibility for the commissioning that we do?
Well,
so that,
if I may respond to that, just one thing that I think we could do a better job of, you know, we're so technologically connected right now, but there's still many people who are not checking for what's going on with the Boston Art Commission and its projects. And I think that there's a lot to be said for old school dissemination of information, especially in public places like the library and police stations and things like that. We really need to let people know. I've had people call me and say, what is going up in my neighborhood? I don't know anything about this. And so I think we can do a better job of letting people know so that they don't feel that it's something that's coming from someone who has not considered what's going on in their neighborhood and how they feel about it.
thank you.
I wonder in that regard whether sometimes the best way to communicate those things is on site itself. So having some kind of signage like a project-based sign.
Sure. Sarah, can you go to the next slide? So this was a draft of a sign that we have in development. But I think, Ikwa, your point in particular about sharing these sort of things, we've in the past made calls to district captains and that sort of thing, but I think libraries and other community resources have been overlooked.
There are a couple of very, very large listservs, at least in the Fort Hill, Roxbury, Dorchester, Garrison, Trotter. Their listserv goes out to 1,000 people. So, you know, that's a great way to put a flyer where we don't have to print and distribute it, but it's going to people who aren't
Mhm.
necessarily checking our site.
Right. Okay. And with that, that was the end of what I have for the director's report. George, I think you wanted to make a comment about a project.
Yes, thank you, Karen. I just it has just come upon me, but Nancy Baker Cahill is an artist who I've worked with many times, and she got in touch and said that she's got a project called Liberty Bell, an augmented reality public art project. It will take place in Boston, in New York in the Rockaways at 4 different sites, in DC at the Hirshhorn, in Philadelphia, in Selma, Alabama, and at Fort Sumter. And what it is a large abstracted bell which sits above a site, and in this case, mostly she's using water. And can you start the video, Sarah? I don't know if you can hear it. There's a definite bell sound, and you might also
Can you hear it now?
Yes,
Can you? I can't really.
I can hear it now.
Okay. And you might also notice the really interesting shadow underneath the object. I find Nancy's work very interesting because it's all hand drawn. She goes into virtual reality and draws these things by hand using brushes in virtual reality, and then transports them to augmented reality. So there's something very handedness about them. I think she's a major artist in this field, and I really think Boston's very excited to is going to be very happy to see this up and running. At this point, we are now talking about putting it over the Fort Point Channel body of water near the Boston Tea Party Museum. And I'm just started working on this last week, so but we'll open on, and the reason I wanted to get this in today is it will open on July 4th and be up for about 6 months. So it'll open before our next meeting.
George, could you say a little bit about how a citizen would be able to access this augmented reality piece if they wanted to on the 4th of July?
Thank you, Ekla. Great question. Nancy has a free downloadable app called Fourth Wall, numeral 4th wall. And from that, you can go and see any of her public art in sight. And of course, here you go to downtown Boston and look over the Fort Point Channel, and you would see this through her app on either a smartphone or a tablet. And the music also, the sound will also come out of that app.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's free. It's available for iOS and Android, and it's a very I've used it a lot. It's a very robust and fun app to use because there are other things on it as well of her work.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? This is brand new to me because, like I said, I just started this week. So I think it's going to be an awful lot of fun, but I'm now committed to staying in town through the 4th of July, and I'm looking forward to seeing this up and running.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's worth, connecting sort of some of the dots from our conversation today, expanding our concept of what public art can be, George, what you've been working on a long time, but what some of us are coming to more under these times, but also interpretation of public artworks, right? So what would it mean to look at our collection and some of our problematic pieces and have not only a plaque, but like augmented reality that would be interesting to people. So I think it would be great to sort of pull all these things together into a conversation about really coming to better understand what our collection is and how we manage it and how we understand it.
I think that's a good idea.
And just one more thing, in service of future augmented reality installations, which I imagine that this is an art form that's going to grow, how do we get this type of information out to our neighborhoods that people can log on with their phones and see these things? Like, what is our responsibility in terms of educating the public about these new technologies that we're participating in on some level?
Well, the last two big ones I've been involved with were up in Salem at the project that Boston Cyber Arts did called the Augmented Landscape, and then another one that the Greenway Conservancy did on the Greenway called Auto Show. And in both cases, signage has a lot to do with it. These are site specific, so you want to come across them where you are, and a very interesting sign. They had beautiful ones in Greenway saying, here's where it is, here's what to do to see it, and here's what you'll see.
Did you set up my card?
Hey. Oh, there we go.
Wow.
That example is over the reflecting pool in DC, but it'll be now on the above the Hirshhorn Museum.
I'll just add to Echo, to your comments both about this and the mural projects and how do we get the word out. I think also, you know, this is tough because it's not like we have tons of capacity to do a lot of events. Right. But I do think that there's a question of like, are there a couple of touch points where there are programs that we can partner with some organizations on to make sure that and like maybe see a demonstration of the augmented reality, even if they don't have like the app on their phones, or like, yeah, I don't know. I think there's ways that we can also draw people to things and make sure that folks just find out that way by maybe doing some light programs. And I'm just throwing this out there, not really knowing exactly how we would do that, but we have had conversations, I feel like, over the years about, including with Percent for Art projects, like, are there ways to bring more people to the projects, like proactively, so that there's a more of a in-person connection and people can really find out about it.
Tara, under the right conditions, these things video really well. And so that's one of the ways I've been doing it, has been getting videos of these works out through social media and through many other ways. And I think that helps a lot. In Salem, we even had Chronicle come and I helped them videotape the pieces, and they did a whole piece of it.
When we get back to school in real time, these would make awesome field trips for classes to come out with their smartphones and experience this augmented reality together on site. I think that would be an exciting field trip as a high school student, or even, you know, grammar school student, if we get back to that.
Yeah.
Sometime soon. But pretty cool.
So anybody have any questions? Karen, can I give you a call tomorrow morning and we can go through this?
Sure.
I have a bunch of questions for you that, in terms of who to contact. But already the Boston Harbor Now got in touch with me, Rebecca. So thank you for arranging that.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm around tomorrow.
Great. I'll give you a call.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think, you know, moving forward, the next item on our agenda requires the attendance of our corporation counsel. I don't know that she's been able to join us yet. I believe she was in another meeting until 5 o'clock, but she should be with us shortly. Do you guys see Nyla on here yet? To that end, I think we should skip to the next item, and just to make note that once again we are sorry that we have not yet been able to welcome in some new commissioners, but a couple of them are in the audience, and we do want to, you know, thank them for their attendance and their continued engagement. I know Brian and I think John were in the meeting, and Dr. Pinder unfortunately had a conflict, so I don't think was able to meet us, but we do thank them for their continued engagement with us in these times. And if, yep. So I haven't heard from Nyla yet, so I think we're just gonna have to go ahead and then maybe circle back.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think this, we're now entering the phase where public testimony will be a portion of the conversation. So these are items for review by the commission, public testimony, and then commission vote. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen the red box that's been on a few screens before, but that's to give you instructions if you're members of the public for how you can offer testimony. Karen's now going to briefly go over the technical side of it.
Sure. And so I'll go over the procedure for public comment. Following each presentation, the commission will have the opportunity to ask some questions, and they might ask any project partners that may be attending to join in after that. And then following that, we will, Mark will invite the public to do the same. And the way you can comment is over Zoom. You can raise your hand by pressing that little hand button, and we will look for that and then call on you. You can also type your question into the chat box via the Zoom meeting platform. And if you are on a phone and you're calling in, you should be able to press *9 to raise your hand and to be called on. When we see you there, we'll put you in a digital line, and when it's your turn, we'll announce you. And you should be able to unmute yourself, and if you can't, we will unmute you. And when we do call on you, please do state your name and share your comment or question. And when it is time for that, we'll give 2 minutes for people to just sort of settle themselves and sort of have a little bit of time to figure out how to engage and also form their question. On the next slide, you can see sort of what I was talking about in terms of what this looks like on Zoom. If this is new to you, you can click the participants button at the bottom of your screen, the one with the 2 little people on it, and then you should find that little blue hand and press that to identify yourself as someone who is looking to speak, and we will do our very best to call on you. Okay, and actually with that, I think Nyla has joined us, and we can go back to the King MOU.
And I'll be recusing myself for that conversation.
Right.
Okay. So Nyla, thank you for being here. We're going to, if you would mind starting your presentation on the Embrace Memorandum of Understanding that we'll be looking at today.
Sure. So what I wanted to speak to you guys a bit about today was just an overview of the MOU. I think, Karen, you may have already given some background.
I have not, I didn't have a chance to.
Oh, okay.
I can give just very briefly. The MOU was scheduled for approval, as you all may remember, before the artist presented the preliminary design to the Boston Art Commission. The Memorandum of Understanding is really just meant to sort of lay out what different expectations are with a third party or a community proposed project to the Art Commission, so that we can sort of make sure that they're very prepared before we come in and present to the Art Commission. And it just helps to lay everything out that we might already have in our policies, but do it in a clear way so we can sort of be on the same page with what expectations are. We were unable to come to a resolution with the Boston Foundation, who you know, is really King Boston in this case, but the Boston Foundation is the organization that is hosting King Boston. So before we got to the preliminary design review, we didn't have that, but we let you know that we were continuing to work on that with them, and we are still doing so in order to acknowledge the Art Commission's expectations regarding intellectual property rights, commercial licensing, and maintenance. And we wish to discuss the Boston Foundation's maintenance obligation as detailed in the current draft of the MOU as part of our discussion today. The Boston Foundation intends to raise funds not to exceed $1 million for the maintenance fund for the Embrace. And as we went over in our recent commissioner training, as staff, there are limitations to the administrative authority that we hold. And for us to sign off on an agreement that includes the recently proposed maintenance fund cap, we require your input. The maintenance fund is related to a final design and maintenance plans, which obviously hasn't been presented to you yet, and so you have not approved. And Nyla will now discuss some possible ways we could move forward with the MOU, or or however you might see to go forward, but that might include including your approval entirely or your approval with stipulations as you do for regular projects.
Thank you, Karen. So as Karen mentioned, the purpose of the MOU is really to provide a roadmap of some sort and a roadmap of the BAC's advisory and review process. So I think you guys have received a copy of the MOU already, and you've probably seen that a lot of the policies that are in our BAC policy book are detailed and outlined in this MOU, because the goal is not to really negotiate any specific rights at this junction, but really just to, again, provide them a roadmap and make sure, because this is a multi-step process, that we have some formal document that makes clear to both parties what the process looks like, but also what the duties and the obligations are throughout the process, or what the BAC expects. So right now where we are, as Karen mentioned, is that we, in our most final iteration of this MOU, and it's the closest we've been, we have some language in there that would require input because it speaks to the custody and control of the piece. So, through your enabling legislation, you guys are charged with taking custody and control of any works of art owned by the city. And as we anticipate this donation, it seems as though questions of maintenance have come up. And very specifically, let's pull this agreement up. Very specifically in section 4 of the proposed MOU, maintenance plan and maintenance funding, there's discussion about TBF's intention to establish an endowment fund and how that would look. The specific language that for us we need your input in is with respect to subsection E, where, and sorry, can someone pull it up? So I don't just read off the language to you guys unless you guys don't mind that.
Natalie, you want us to pull up the MOU? Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, was that circulated?
It was circulated.
Okay, so it's subsection E, and I don't mind reading it off, but the language that we wanted to highlight is that subsection E, there's a section that says King Boston, buying through TBF by funding or establishing a trust or endowment, intends to provide funds to the city in an amount to be mutually agreed upon by King Boston and the BAC that shall not exceed $1 million. So for that type of language, which essentially serves as a cap on their fundraising obligations, I suspect that there are a lot of considerations from the BAC that you guys, or things that you guys will need to consider, since this conversation generally or typically, as my understanding of your process goes, would come at a later point. And in considering that, thinking about options you have to approve this agreement. So what we're asking for isn't necessarily just an approval of the agreement, but really it's to grant Karen the authority to enter into an agreement that is making a representation about maintenance at this junction. A couple things that I noted that you may want to consider as you guys are advising us on whether or not we are approving or we are approving with some stipulations are just, I think, some of the concerns or some of the topics that would come up at a later time. So for example, just generally speaking, if there's any more information you would need to consider, now's the time we'd like to at least have that information, or at least presented, so that we are able, if there's a conditional approval, to get that information and schedule a timeline for any other vote that would need to take place. will there be an immediate, another question is, will there be an immediate need for the availability of maintenance funds? So again, I don't know how much you guys know about what the plan is, and my understanding is that it's an endowment fund. So very little I know is that endowment funds usually will, usually are going to be held by an entity. And on top of that, it's setting aside original assets that grow over time, and you can, funds may not necessarily be immediately available, but over time will be. So all those considerations, I think, are proper right now to have. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Is my background loud? I'm hearing something.
There's some movement. I don't know if it's from you or in someone else's background.
I'm sorry. Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. There's someone's door opening and closing. Nyla, would it be helpful to you to share your screen if you want to go over the document? Or I don't know if the commissioners would prefer that, or how you all, I know it's a lot to take in verbally. Ikwa, you're muted.
My screen is not a screen that anyone will understand right now. So
okay, that's fine.
Probably not going to be the most helpful, but Karen, I believe the questions that we had come up with, it's fine to pose those, and it's really just, again, for the BAC's consideration. I think the important takeaway is that there's, and you guys have been in the practice of doing this, but it's for more than you commissioners, that you can choose to approve, or you can choose to approve with conditions, and obviously choose to not approve. But in terms of when we are electing to approve a motion with conditions, we do have an obligation as a commission to clearly spell out those conditions. And then it's incumbent upon the staff to then make sure that those conditions are implemented, or that they're getting the information necessary to actually affect the motion.
Wow.
So I think just for some, maybe for some additional context on the decision point that we're at, the thing that's different about this is that we normally would be able to make determinations about maintenance funding when we have a maintenance plan and really the designs are finalized and we know how much things will cost to maintain. But in this case, the MOU would put in that $1 million, up to $1 million, or whatever, however it was phrased, Nyla, the $1 million cap on fundraising that would go toward a maintenance fund. And so we would be agreeing to that number now instead of later in the process. I do think that, just for context, that's a number that I don't know that we've ever seen. We've never had $1 million for maintenance for a project, I think. So in general, that seems good. I will say, like, just personally from my perspective, I wouldn't have a problem with signing on to that. But that's the consideration that we have to weigh, is whether or not to move forward with that agreement, knowing that there's a number in there that isn't necessarily correlated to a maintenance plan.
So I have a question. This is Lisa Tung. I think what Nyla was saying, that it's an endowment. We don't get $1 million right away, correct? They're giving us money to be built up over time to $1 million, and then we are using some amount of that interest, or am I mistaken?
I think how the money is held and used.
Lisa,
go ahead. Go ahead, Nyla.
So we probably were going to give the same answer or not, but really what I was going to say is that we don't have specific information about the endowment that's being created. The language that's used in that was given to us is that there will be an endowment established. So, you know, I think we can speak or think about it very generally. And you are probably correct in this idea that funds aren't immediate when an endowment is, or at least my understanding is, when an endowment is created, funds aren't immediately available. There's annual income over time that's used to continue to sustain that endowment, but it's not necessarily something that we would have access to. The information I do, and I think I'm right about this, Karen, is that the thought behind it is that TBF would be holding this endowment. And that's really the information we have, is that there's going to be an endowment established. Their obligation, their goal is to raise up to 1 million, and it would be held by TBF.
So then my other questions would be, what is the timeline here? For example, is TBF raising the money during the construction of this? So when this piece is done, let's say I'm making up dates in 2021, there's some amount of money already there so that if, God forbid, on the first day it's open, it gets vandalized or damaged, there are already some funds that will go towards fixing whatever might happen in the first month or the first year of this piece. So I think that's something that I would like to know personally. What is the fundraising schedule? How much are they going to have in hand by the time that this piece is done so that we are protected if there is some kind of damage?
So in the MOU, the language that's been proposed says that they'll be establishing a trust or endowment. So they're not specifying which of those it is in their language. I think their primary concern is their fundraising at this point. You know, as we know, they've been doing fundraising for the sculpture and also for the Economic Center for Justice in Roxbury. So they have, I think, a desire to just set an expectation. The problem that we're having is not with the amount of money, although we do need to spend time, Lisa, as you're talking about the structure, and as Nyla just talked about who's going to hold it, there are a lot of details in there that are really important. Is it just for the sculpture? Is it for the landscaping as well? So I think there's a lot for us to look at there. But the problem that we've come upon administratively, as you know, Carl pointed out, is that, you know, I'd be the one signing this document, and I cannot sign off on anything about the this maintenance cap without your approval. It goes outside of what my authority is. And so this is not something that we would usually look to until later. And we would look to it, you know, and think about the structure of it, think about who's holding it, you know, what does it include? What's, you know, what else is being considered? Like we talked a little bit about the intellectual property or the commercial licensing, what other fundraising would be happening by and through the piece. So those are all things that we would normally want to consider holistically. That said, our partner in this project, King Boston, is taking on a lot of fundraising responsibility, and they want to just say, we're going to keep it like this. You guys aren't going to sort of raise the bar later. And so we just have these sort of these different considerations to take into account.
I have two questions. One, from the very beginning, talking about this work, a lot of discussion has been on the pristine surface that it's going to have, and clearly something that's going to take a lot of energy to keep like that without getting dull. So one question is an endowment of $1 million enough to keep that if it's going to have to be done like on a regular basis every year? And the second question is, and I think Karen just sort of may have hinted at answering it, can we do further fundraising to add to this endowment through other means by, like you said, intellectual property rights and things like that, T-shirts?
Right. So, I mean, those would be things to have a conversation with the artist and the Boston Foundation about. They're not, I think we make mention within the MOU, if you look, that would be a conversation we would expect to have at a later date, but it is not something that is explicated in the document in detail at this time.
So Karen, it sounds like today's order of business is to take a vote to see if we give you the authority so that you can be the fiscal representative or whatever the term is for this project, correct?
But not only that, but are there stipulations that we want to attach to that and whether or not we feel comfortable giving approval on this agreement as it stands today? If I were signing it for myself, I would feel like I don't have enough information, solid information, to make the decision today.
I agree, Aqua, because usually the way an endowment works is that there's some amount of interest that is spent that is used. So let's say they raise $1 million right away. it's usually 4%. That's $40,000. So I have no idea, to keep it all shiny and nice and the plants all meticulously mowed and weeded, is $40,000 enough? But as you're building up to the endowment, if you don't have the million, then it's only 4% spent off of whatever is raised then. Could be off of 10,000, could be off of 200,000. So I think there are lots of details that we definitely need to iron out. But I think is the process here, I just want to sort of understand a timeline. First, to give Karen the authority, and then we talk about details. We go back to them with, here are our questions.
Lisa, I agree with you.
Oh, sorry, George.
No, I'm just saying I agree with Lisa.
One thing that I'll add is that just so the thing that's in the language of the MOU, there's still room on what form that funding actually takes. So there's still room for discussing what is the best way to hold that money so that we can be in a better position, like you're saying, say something happens day one, and we need some extraordinary amount of money to fix it. The other thing is that the BAC still has regulatory power to approve the design, the final design and the maintenance plan and all of those other pieces. So I would say that we know that we're not going to be able to iron out every detail for this MOU at the stage that we're at. And we need to have a document in place so that the artists can continue doing the work, because this is holding things up a little bit. But know that it's not like this is a thing that we agree on and then everything else is sort of like negotiated away. Like, we have the rest of the regulatory power of the BAC to add stipulations or bring up all of these other things for points of discussion. The real thing that would be locked in is that their commitment is the $1 million. And I will say, like, realistically, if there's a design that requires more than $1 million raised by them, I don't know how realistic that design is. Like, I don't know that we would be responsible to approve it. If this is something that has to be like shine 6 times a day and it costs, $250,000 a year to maintain, then I think we're putting ourselves in a really bad spot, because it's not like there's an infinite amount of fundraising that they can do. So I think, given that, that's part of what I'm thinking about when I think that $1 million is probably a pretty good number for us. But that's just my opinion.
I have a question. Are there other funds available in our government that might cover costs to things that are perhaps categorized as more than vandalism? This is a racial monument that could come under attack by right-wing organizations, and that's just an example. Are there monies that are set aside in our government to handle those kinds of vandalism or terrorist attacks on monuments or buildings, for that matter?
One thing that I am not sure how it would be handled, but I wonder what would be handled under our insurance policy with that. That might be something we need to spend a little time investigating to get back to you. I don't know. We have a fine arts insurance policy that we share with the Boston Public Library for our works, and we certainly don't use it frequently. Most of the work we do would just be done directly. But if something of the nature that you're talking about, Bob, we might be wise to find out what we could handle through that.
Yeah, my question is really, was there any other government agency with money set aside to handle situations like that? Do we know of any?
No, nothing comes to mind for me.
No, okay.
I think the Smithsonian might have a program, if I recall correctly, along those lines, but it's incredibly underfunded now.
And were we able to establish whether this maintenance plan is... Am I muted? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. And were we able to establish whether the this fund would cover the landscaping as well as the sculpture piece? Or is that something that we can stipulate?
That's not clear. And I would say, as we looked at the recent design, I think the question to us is also like, what do we consider the artwork? right? So maybe in the first version of it that we saw during the competition, the landscaping did not, at least from my perspective, seem to be as much part of the artwork. But if we look at, you know, the image we're looking at right now with the names in bronze across the groundwork, I would say if like, I would consider those pieces as part of the artwork. So, but doesn't include like paying someone to mow the lawn in those shapes. Like that's not clear to me. So that might necessitate a conversation. Cara might, you know, arrange for us to meet with the Parks Department and have a more extended conversation about what that looks like, and to meet with the Friends of the Public Garden, who takes, you know, responsibility and care for the park, and who do incredible work to keep it in the state that it's in. So those would be our partners in going forward. But what are realistic expectations around that? And those are things we might need to consider again as we go forward, looking at final design, right? What can we really take care of? Not just, you know, what's not going to just look good on day one, but what will look good, you know, 6 months, 6 years, 60 years later.
Yeah, and Parks is committed to figuring out how much, you know, as much as can fit within their regular maintenance that they would do. And they can get a little bit creative about what that looks like. But I think to Karen's point, you know, there are these like rounded pieces of stone here that you wouldn't, you know, there's equipment that's just not going to be able to do that. That's what the parks normally uses. So, but I think again, for me, that comes back to, these are all considerations that we should be thinking about as we iterate on the design or see iterations on the design.
So to Cara's point about not holding things up, because it sounds like this MOU has to go through, can anyone give us guidance on what you would like for us to discuss today so that this can go through?
So Lisa, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I think someone raised it a moment ago, but I do like the idea of the motion being, and this is thinking about whether or not if there are going to be questions that come out of it today where you want a response before approving an MOU. I think what might make sense here is that there's a motion to grant Karen the limited.
Oh.
Now that you're cutting out.
My apologies. I have terrible service right now.
Right as she was about to give us a motion.
I know, right? Nyla, you could chat to us
or type it in chat.
Yeah, you could type it in if that's easier for you.
The question I have, how do we treat maintenance MOUs? Are they more open-ended, or they have a cap to them?
So normally we wouldn't have something like this. We in the major works that we've been commissioning recently, obviously those are city owned, so we take that responsibility on ourselves, and we don't have extensive funding. So, you know, getting to Bob's point, we don't necessarily have government funds lined up to care for the works. And so with this one, with it being such a major investment by, you know, the people of Boston, we are paying particular care to it. But it is not a standard that we have with the rest of our works. We have fundraising efforts to care for existing pieces that have been done in the past, and there have been there's been some funds raised for projects like the Bill Russell Legacy Project that happened some years ago, where there was a fund created by the Celtics Foundation that was held at the Boston Foundation, separate from other funds to care for the piece. But in most of the projects that come to us third party are from communities. They're from, you know, neighborhood groups that, you know, can't do this kind of fundraising. So we have both special consideration for this and a special opportunity to do fundraising to care for the future of the piece here.
So it was them that asked to put the maintenance piece in the MOA, or was it something?
I think it's come up in community conversations around this piece from the beginning, that there would be a fear of doing a lot of fundraising for the creation of a piece without thinking about what the extensive maintenance would be. So I think that is something that came up through community conversations and, from the city, thinking about that we will be taking on ownership and therefore care of the piece in perpetuity.
Have you ever done a separate MOU around maintenance? Because I think that's a piece to me that needs further discussion and thought. I read through the MOA and understand all the rest of it, but I think this is the one piece of the MOA or MOU that's, I think we're all sort of concerned about.
Right.
I don't know if we can separate this and talk about doing a separate MOA at a future date when we have a better sense of what's part of the piece and what would need to be.
So that had been our hope, Michael. We had hoped to do this later, but for the Boston Foundation, they feel that this is very important for them to set a fundraising cap. I don't think they are, they want to create all the details that we're asking about right now, but I think they want the city to acknowledge their fundraising cap in some form.
For maintenance, not for the whole piece. Or for
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, we had sent a version that removed a number altogether, and have gone back and forth that this is what they would like to be considered. So I think if we don't, if we are not comfortable with the cap or feel like we need more information that would then push this back by any significant amount of time, then we might be going towards an outcome where we do not have an agreement on an MOU with them.
Could we go back to what Nyla was going to say before she cut out, please?
Yeah.
So she is trying to chat to me. She's cutting out. The Zoom platform keeps shutting down on her. So she's unable to speak or use the chat right now.
Can she call in?
Let me suggest that to her. I don't know if she's having trouble. I can read what she's just chatted us. What might make the most sense is a motion to grant Karen, as director of the BAC, authority to enter into an MOU with TBF that recognizes a monetary limit on TBF's fundraising obligation.
So without giving a specific dollar amount.
I don't think they'll sign anything without a specific dollar amount, though. I mean, I think we're just in this hard spot where we've been, as Cara said, going back and forth trying to make, use this MOU to sort of, as I said, like as we had originally intended it. But I think because of their priorities of, doing fundraising and feeling like they take it on this great responsibility, that we should be willing to acknowledge that they are capped there. And we have asked in, a million different ways and explained ourselves for, why we would want to do it later. And we have not been successful in doing so, which is why we're coming to you with it.
Okay, so it sounds like if you want to keep moving along and they don't want, or they feel that $1 million is what they can raise, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of discussion. We just have them cap it at $1 million, give Karen the authority so we can keep moving this along, and then have those other stipulations that we always have when we're looking at final design or whatever, correct?
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's clear.
Just one other possibility. They say that they want to raise $1 million and establish it as a trust or an endowment. Is it possible that they just raise $1 million and it is in some form that generates income that we would use under normal conditions for maintenance, but if needed, we could draw on more of it rather than just the interest? So I don't know if that is some different type of endowment.
George, I think that's where it's different from the trust. And I don't know enough about this, but it sounds like an endowment, we would draw off of the interest because they hold the principal. But the trust, maybe that is set up in a different way. And maybe that's a very quick answer that Nyla could give us. Because if they're just raising, let's say 250 in a trust, maybe we can access that whenever needed.
Right. I mean, I think of a college endowment where they use the interest to for everything they do with it. But should something horrible happen, they can dig into the endowment for a larger chunk of change at any time. Is there some way to write the endowment that would allow that to happen?
I think that we could get into that detail as a next step as we figure out what that actually looks like, because you know, we don't know how much $1 million would actually spin off, if that's worth the trade-off, or what changes we could write into an endowment to try to access more of it if there's like a catastrophic event. You know, there's a lot to still sort out there that's in our power to sort out, even if we sign the MOU.
Any other thoughts or questions?
I feel comfortable with allowing Karen to do the negotiation. I just don't feel comfortable with the $1 million cap. I just, looking at the piece, my many discussions with parks I just see the maintenance of this piece exceeding $1 million. I mean, I think as George said, whether it's the money for the piece itself, or does it also include the plaza? I mean, I understand the sort of the pickle we're in, and I wish I didn't unnecessarily appreciate that we're being pushed into this corner the way I see it.
So Michael, I wonder, and commissioners, I wonder if we might want to have another special meeting where we can focus on this and we can gather some more detail in answer to the questions that you've raised, and we can make sure that Nyla is able to be present, although I think she might be joining us now, so we can get you some answers to your questions.
I would agree, because I would like to get some input from parks, for example, on how would they see cost of maintaining the plaza. Since they have similar, I'm assuming, other installations similar to this in their parks. So yes, I would be for that.
Also input from the artists as to what level of perfection they want the surface of the sculpture to be, and how much do they think that's going to cost to maintain.
Well, probably not even the artist. Maybe it could be a conservator that the artist has hired that could recommend what the materials require as well.
I think the catch there, though, is that we're not at final design yet, right? So
exactly.
I don't think we can ask that. I think the question is whether or not we are comfortable with TBF capping their fundraising, and whether we are, you know, considering how funds could be raised in the future if they're needed, and then what is the structure, like who is holding these funds and how can we access them? I think those are the questions around this. The details around the maintenance plan, I think there's no way we can expect those from a conservator or the artist at this point.
But the cap could begin to affect how we approach the design of the piece, because it could begin to affect what the materials are, the size, what's going on in the environment around it, knowing that there's this fixed amount that could be for maintenance. So that's the way I would see this. It could affect what the final product is, knowing that they don't have enough money in the future to maintain what they're proposing.
But there will be some possibility of city funding to work with this $1 million fund. Wouldn't the city also be contributing to the maintenance of the project as its custodian?
Our funds for conservation of artworks are fairly limited. We pay for example, the house doctor RFP that we're putting out is for $50,000 for a year to have someone come in and work with us on pieces all over the city.
Wow.
And that money comes from an inconsistent source of our revolving fund. So we don't have consistent funding. So I think Parks has, responsibilities all around the city, and the Friends of the Public Garden, they do fundraising for works throughout the common. So I think, everyone wants to be just, the common, the public garden, and the Comath Mall. So I think we just, we do want to be thoughtful about this. In the MOU, TBF does put forward that they understand that we could do more fundraising. So that's, mentioned. I think we just will need to be realistic about what we might be able to do. And I think the $1 million will influence what we're thinking about. What we've been trying to think about having something that we can maintain throughout this project, right? And so that was largely, informative of our response to the material choice. what we could do. So I think that's already happening.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it would be ideal to have a full maintenance plan in order to make a fully informed decision about what the maintenance budget should be, what that number should be. But I think realistically, you know, that if that number goes up, that takes away also from the Economic Justice Center. I mean, there's one larger fundraising goal, and the rest of the fundraising that King Boston is doing is going towards creating that space at the Roxbury branch in Nubian Square. And so there's a little bit of a, you know, if we decided this should be $3 million, I don't know that we would get that funding realistically, just based on how much money can be raised and what that puts us in conflict with. And I also don't know that that would be a very sustainable thing for us to do. Like, I do think there is a reality of how do we, like, I think we do make design choices and feedback based on what we can actually maintain in a way that makes sense. Right. So it's tough, but I acknowledge that it's a tough situation.
Well, I would also just add that it's sort of obvious that this fundraising for the sculpture itself or the grounds, fundraising for this organization in Roxbury, those are all sexy things to give money to. Maintenance is the least sexiest thing to give money to. So it's going to be difficult. I'm sure raising $1 million for that is going to be quite a bit of work.
Right.
I would like to have Nyla in on this conversation, and I would be up for the suggestion that was made to have another meeting in the near future. I think there's so many questions about this that are still unanswered.
Okay, so
does someone want to make a motion to that effect, that we move this into another meeting to discuss the details before we make a final decision?
I second that.
Karen, do you need?
Hi, this is Nyla.
Oh,
hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, Thomas.
Oh, okay, so the original suggestion was really to have a two-part, was presented the option of a two-part vote. Or not even a two-part vote, two-part meeting with a vote happening in the first meeting, this one. But it was really to present that option of conditionally approving. I think what we're talking about now is you want to consider this vote at a later meeting.
I think that's where we're headed.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and a meeting that you would join us and sort of help us clarify a little bit more. Maybe we'd have the document in front of us and then be able to make what would feel like a more informed choice.
Can I ask a quick question before we start voting? By delaying giving Karen the authority, because it sounds like regardless of what has to happen, Karen doesn't have the authority right now to do this. So don't we need to give her that authority anyway, whether it's today or at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct. So the agreement as it is right now, she does not have the authority to sign it, or at least if she signs it, there'd be parts of this agreement that could be invalid. So what we're asking for, or at least what I would see as maybe an efficient course of action, would be the granting of the authority on conditions of delivering certain information to you. That's one option. My phone was going in and out, and it sounded as if Commissioner Fulfield was making a suggestion for another course of action.
I think we're just trying to understand, or at least I'm trying to understand what is we don't want to hold, I think everyone doesn't want to hold this up. And then I think we just need to know, by not granting Karen the authority today, does that hold things up with this MOU? Yes?
Okay, so yes, it does, because we won't be able to sign it. However, I think Cara or Karen, you guys might be closer to the timeline for this.
So, I mean, I would say that it's true that not being able to sign, if I'm not able to sign it, we'll hold it up. That said, I think you are looking for further information. I imagine that you could put forward a vote that would give me the authority pending your receipt of certain information. We could also, as mentioned, hold a special meeting where you could have the vote, where you would give me the authority to sign once that you receive the information and have a better understanding of the MOU and the expectations there. I think, you know, we could, you know, go forward with any of those. Cara, I don't know what your thoughts are there, if you have a better sense of what the timeline is here.
No, I mean, I think it's, you know, the timeline was originally that we would have this a very long time ago. So I think whatever we need to do, we need to do. So that's fine. But I don't think that we need a special vote to give Karen the authority if there's a pending process anyway where there's going to be more information, where then we have to vote on agreeing to what's in the document. I think we can do those things at the same time, which means we don't need a vote right now.
Okay, that makes sense. And then are we confident that we can get whatever this information is that we want from the places and the people that we need it from in a timely way?
I would say no. I mean, I think a lot of what the information that we want is information that wouldn't be available until final design, just based on the questions that have come up here. So I think part of the discussion needs to be whether or not that's what the commission is asking for, to not have this MOU and just go through the process as we normally would, which would include asking for a maintenance plan and a funding commitment at that time. I don't know what the consequences of that would be for the project. So maybe that's something that we could find out more about. But I don't think that we'll know like detail at the level of some of the questions that came up today.
Until we have a final design. A lot of it depends on that.
But so I'll just play devil's advocate. If this entity has told us this is what they're willing to raise, I'm not convinced that whatever conversation we have is going to make them raise more. If their goal is to raise $1 million for the maintenance of this piece and to raise $2 million for the center, correct?
Right.
So it feels in a little way that our hand, it's not that our hands are tied, but it's sort of set. This is the amount that they are willing to give to us. And we either figure out a way to augment it if we think maintenance is going to be more, or we figure out through design and the materials, like Cara said, which is we don't want something that's going to require 6 polishings a day that's going to be $1 bazillion to maintain.
Or Lisa, I think what I was trying to say was maybe another way to do it is to figure out what kind of vessel we want to put this $1 million into. That is it a vessel that's just generating interest and we're only allowed to interest, or is it a vessel that has more options to it?
Okay, but that's not separate from this possible approval, which is they've set the cap at $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Unless Nyla can tell us quickly now what is the difference between a trust and the endowment, and then we go back, or someone goes back to the Boston Foundation saying the preference is that you put it in X because that would allow us to access the money more, right?
Right.
I also think that Karen's suggestion of the insurance company might be worth looking into. You know, if we can have more monies available through our insurance to supplement anything that would happen to the sculpture, you know, that would make me feel a lot better.
Yes, that would be great, except I don't think that doesn't change what the Boston Foundation will raise, right. Correct? Because at the end of the day, they still want to raise $1 million. So we are then accepting yes to their offer of raising $1 million, and we work with that parameter, or we, I guess, say no, you know, and then I don't know.
Well, they're raising $1 million, and if we have a $20 million insurance policy, I'd be just fine with $1 million raise.
Right.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so what I've heard so far, and I'm sure there are other things, is, you know, the fact that we don't really have a maintenance plan, the possibility of a private consultant giving us some direction on that, whether or not the maintenance plan includes sculpture and landscape, what is Parks going to be responsible for in terms of the landscape, a trust or an endowment, and what are the differences between those two ways of holding this $1 million. And I would also add, you know, if the Boston Foundation is holding the money, how easy is it for us to access it to take care of maintenance? And I don't know if there were other things that people were concerned about, but I'm just trying to keep a running list here if we do decide to hold this second meeting, so we know that what we're going to be discussing and what kind of information we need.
I would put forward that in addition to the Boston Foundation potentially holding the funds, that you know, there might be other possibilities, and I think we'd want to think about what they might be. Like, would it make sense for the Friends of the Public Garden to hold it? Would it make sense for the City of Boston to hold it? I'm not sure what the best option is.
Is there anything else that people feel should be on this discussion list?
That sounds about right, Ekwa. I think we need to have more information before we can make a full decision, but maybe we can even separate it so that the maintenance plan is, you know, a different MOU. But on that note, I unfortunately have to leave. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Okay. So I guess I'm trying to understand what kind of motions we're entertaining. Either have a secondary meeting where we will vote on everything, giving Karen the authority, and after we've looked at some of this information, or giving Karen the authority today with the stipulation that we would like to get information on these 5 or 6 other subjects.
So Aiko, I have a question again, and I'm sorry to keep belaboring this point. What would happen if we made a motion that granted Karen, as the director of the BAC, the authority to enter into a BOU with the Boston Foundation's recognized limit of $1 million? Because that's what we do know, fundraising limit. But with the understanding, or maybe we ask them before we enter this, what is the best way to access this money? Because these other things, the maintenance plan, the parks responsibility, all the things that you listed out, that, yes, it impacts the $1 million or not, but it doesn't change the fact that they are raising $1 million, right? It's do we give Karen the authority to be our fiscal agent so that she can sign this MOU saying that the $1 million, we accept the $1 million and that's the cap. However, we still have these other questions, first and foremost being, what's the best way to access this money, whether with them or in a trust, an endowment, or with another entity, fine. And then all these other things that we will know once we get into the nitty-gritty of final design or talking to more people.
So Lisa, are you making a motion?
No, I'm asking, again, with legal counsel there, does this make sense to do? Because we also don't want to hold up this process, right? I'm also hearing that Kara said that this was something that we should, that seems like it's a little bit overdue. It's this timeline that they should have gotten it, yesterday or whatever, so that they can keep moving forward. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do we move forward?
The impact of delaying, this is just my understanding. This is, I don't have firsthand communication with artists, but my understanding is that it's a signal that the BAC is committed to moving the project forward. I think that the contract with the artist is pending signing this MOU. So technically, they're still not under contract to do design work. you know, is there a big difference between a month, like one more month from now or whenever it is that we actually take a vote on it? Maybe not, but I think we're kind of in a catch-22 if they feel like they need this MOU in order to move forward, and then we need them to move forward in order to sign the MOU.
Could we put forward, could the Art Commission potentially entertain an approval with stipulations that the Art Commission, you know, gives me the ability to sign, but we'll need to approve the structure of the maintenance fund and the relationship it has with other departments, the scope of the artwork, as well as the intellectual property and commercial licensing plans and agreements? Like, could we, Nyla, could we build those things in and just say, we agree to this, but, you know, the Art Commission still wants to be able to review and approve these structures?
So the way the language is drafted right now, you know, there is language that recognizes that this cap isn't intended to limit any other consideration about the sufficiency of a maintenance plan. It is strictly for us to recognize that they are only committing to raising this dollar amount. So I think what we might want to do is for this agreement, if I agree with Lisa that we're not going to change the funding obligation. It's their funding obligation, or right now what their plan is to do is to raise $1 million. It's either that we're either going to sign an agreement or enter into an MOU with them, or they'll go through the process. I think for us, what might be advantageous is to say, okay, we need this information now, or at least need a promise that we'd be delivered this information with any endowment. So I don't think we're going to have much control over how this is endowed. I think the question is how much information we can get now or at the time when we're being delivered the deed to this piece of work. So if there are a lot of questions about the form that this is going to take, then we could very much go back to TBF. And again, Karen and Karen, you guys are closer to TBF to know how receptive they'll be, but to ask that they provide us with copies of information related to this fund, and also to just make sure that we have very clear guidelines for how the funds will be accessed, where it will be held. And I think the biggest question that it sounded like you guys would deliberate was what will be available immediately. And I think the form that this takes will probably answer that question, but we can go back to them and say, this is the information that we're going to need in order to sign this. And the important thing today is just for us to want to be comfortable with this idea that this is one piece of the maintenance considerations that we are considering a bit earlier, or prematurely considering our typical process. And then two, whether or not we are comfortable with saying, at this point, we will have, at this point, we're going to have this very limited agreement. At this point, we are going to agree to this in a very limited manner, but we expect this information, and this information is exactly the information we're going to need to say yes or no when you guys are before us. And I think as long as we're making that clear right now, that there's no wrong way of going about this, because their obligation isn't going to change. We just want to put ourselves in a position to get the information we need as soon as possible to communicate to them what our next steps are going to be. And I'm sorry if I'm going in and out, so I'm hearing myself echo.
So, Nyla, I think, you know, can you confirm, is this in line with what you're saying, that if the BAC makes a motion, can you hear me? Yeah. The BAC makes
and I'm sorry, I'm actually hearing myself echo right now, so it's a little bit difficult for me to speak, but.
The BAC makes an motion in which they acknowledge the $1 million fundraising goal for the Embrace by the Boston Foundation, and that they approve the director, me, to sign with the to sign on their behalf, or to sign for the Art Commission, with the stipulation that the Art Commission will in the future need to, as part of final design approval, approve the structure of the maintenance fund and the relationship with other departments and the scope of the artwork, as well as other issues around intellectual property and commercial licensing. Could we just say all that out so that we are agreeing, but also I understand that that might be, there's room left for that in the future, but since these are the concerns of the Art Commission, that we can just state them?
Were you reading the vote that you are preparing right now?
I'm trying to I was taking notes of, ICWA listed a few things out. There's some questions about trust or endowment. So the language that I just said maintenance fund without defining it. So I was trying to listen to what other people had said and pull it together.
The question I have is the language stated, is it capped at $1 million?
Yes.
Does it say up to $1 million so they can come back to us and say we only got 750,000 and then we're stuck with that? Can we say that if we're going to go this direction, can we have the language say that basically it's $1 million and that's no less than $1 million? So at least we're not having the possibility that they come back to us with 500,000 or 750,000, that we're looking at a minimum of $1 million rather than sort of an undefined minimum, which is if it's reading now.
Yeah, at the moment, it definitely, the fundraising goal is $1 million, and it's agreed that it shall not exceed $1 million, but it doesn't say it'll be $1 million.
Right, so it could be much less, which is a problem, I would say.
Yep, and I just want to reiterate that the purpose of this MOU wasn't to necessarily negotiate some of these questions that would come at a later time, but to recognize the obligations around them. So for this particular one, I would be reluctant to say that we should be negotiating what their obligation is right now and asking them to commit to a certain dollar, but rather to, again, make it very clear that we're aware that they're committing to raising this amount, and the BAC fully recognizes that, recognizes or appreciates their position, but we also want to make clear ours, which is that you guys are more likely to consider this maintenance fund as sufficient if it is closer to this number, and that we're entering it into this agreement with that understanding that, they've committed to raising $1 million, but not necessarily that we are requiring them to. And I don't think that this agreement or in any of the conversations the idea is this is what we're required to do. We're only doing this. It's just to make clear that this is an obligation right now. So I think we should leave the language of this broad enough to say that, you're granting CARE and the authority to enter into an MOU recognizing a financial limit or a monetary limit. I don't know if the vote actually even needs to identify what that limit is. And then I think that the follow-up should be, and on the condition that they deliver certain information to us. You guys have raised a number of concerns. If we can have that in a document, or if we can have just the questions or the information points that you guys will need to fully consider it later, I think we can get that information and provide it to you before the execution of this document.
So it sounds like, in a way, what you are saying, Nyla, is that today we could vote to give Karen the authority to vote on our behalf, and the Boston Art Commission staff could follow up on some of this information that we need to get from other parties for negotiation of the MOU. For making it more specifically what we need it to be, but that she can sign this document.
If I get you the information that you've asked for.
Yeah, because it sounds like we're going around.
And
I think, you know, we have other people who've been waiting. We have other people who've been waiting quite patiently for other presentations. We need to move on. So I think we need to decide whether or not we want another meeting to discuss this, or if the Art Commission would be willing to vote to, you know, to allow me to sign pending your receipt and acceptance of certain information. However, that would require, you know, I think that would require another meeting, right?
Right.
Yes.
So can't we just have a special meeting as we talked about before? I don't think we're getting anywhere and we're making a lot of people wait.
Okay.
So I want to be considerate also of your time since we're over 6 o'clock.
So do you even want to make a motion for you to be able to sign this MOU?
I don't think we came to a clear, any clarity there.
All right.
I think we're talking in circles, I'm afraid.
Right, I agree. Can we just agree that we'll set up a second meeting to flesh out the rest of this and get this
right? Because
signed somehow?
Because if there were stipulations, and we would need to bring them back to you anyway, Lisa, right? So.
Okay, sure. I don't think we need to put like a whole detailed list of stipulations. I think we just give you the approval, and then all they have to tell us right now is that the structure of the fund, and then we say we'll be coming back to them with other concerns. But that's okay. We can go. Yeah, I didn't realize there was even more presentations because I have to jump off soon. So we can move on, and we'll have the special meeting.
All right. Well, learned a lot today. I'm going to pass this back to Mark Pasnick as the chair. And Tricia, if you could reach out to us to set up a second meeting to finish discussing this, that would be great.
Absolutely, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Everyone, yeah.
So we are going to have a slight shift in our schedule and move to Lily Manycolor's presentation.
Okay.
Lily, if you can unmute yourself and then begin your presentation.
Alito, I'm here. Just FYI, my dog is snoring really loudly, so you may hear that.
Our meeting was very boring, I know. Thank you for your patience, first of all, and welcome to the Art Commission meeting.
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad to be here. I'm going to do my traditional introduction, and then I'll go in. Halito Ja'atasi Lili Indeshnakas Mayin Gandorem. I'm a mixed Choctaw woman. I'm a member of the Warrior Society. My name and clan comes from the Anishinaabe people of the Red Lakes Band of the Ojibwe. Next slide. Yakoki for the opportunity to present this installation, Misko Dudaswan, Ojibwe for Red Lodge. I reside on the lands of the Massachusetts and Narragansett peoples, and I want to acknowledge that this installation will exist on the lands of the Massachusetts people. The Council of the Massachusetts people has given me permission to install this art piece, and that is a great honor, for it is their permission that matters most. And I want to encourage the BAC and all non-Indigenous artists working in public art to decolonize colonial bureaucracy and prioritize the Massachusetts tribe's involvement and permission in all future projects on their lands. It is an honor for me as a Choctaw woman and a guest on these lands to be in community with the local tribes and to carve decolonial space for Indigenous visibility, which is the primary focus of this installation. This installation comes as a direct response to the 400-year anniversary of the Pilgrim settler establishment on Turtle Island, colonially known as the United States, and the centuries of consistent and diligent systemized genocide of Indigenous people. This installation focuses on an almost 500-year epidemic of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls that was brought by colonialism and white supremacy, and continues into today through man camps, sex trafficking, police brutality, and targeted kidnappings, to name just a few. In the words of Gloria Y. Anzaldúa, a Chicanx writer, activist, and scholar, healing involves the restoration of power, life force, or soul. This Installation is a physical gateway for the power to return to my people and for healing and connection between Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks around the issues of continued genocide of Indigenous people to grow. This installation embodies healing by reclaiming visual space in Boston's colonial culture. This installation is a reminder to everyone that Indigenous people are still here, that our women are sacred, and if there is to be any peace, the genocide must end, among many other decolonial changes. This installation will exist for 1 moon cycle, around 28 days. The temporary nature of this installation speaks to the constant dehumanizing stereotypes and cultural norms that Indigenous people are a, quote, thing of the past. My goal for this installation is to call people in and encourage them to do their own decolonial learning about colonialism's war on Indigenous people and the systemized femicide of Indigenous women. Next slide, please. Community engagement and location. Due to the situation around COVID, the original plans for community engagement had to shift, and we were unable to come together to sew the tapestry. Instead, each dress has been decorated by a local Indigenous woman within the safety of their own homes. It was very important for me that members of the local tribes engage in the tapestry making as a way to defy the colonial goals to divide and conquer Indigenous people and to keep us as enemies instead of neighbors and relatives. These women are from the Massachusetts tribe, the Nipmuc Nation, the Blackfoot Nation from Canada, and the Cherokee and Haliwa-Saponi tribes. Together we have woven songs, our grief, and our love and prayers into a space that again will visually reiterate our right to live free of violence as Indigenous women. And a little bit of detail on the dresses. They are cut from red cotton and decorated on, and then will be sewn together in a patchwork that will then become the tapestries and will be tacked to the frame of the installation using non-traditional methods just for extra security. The location of this installation is profound in that Boston is one of the founding places of colonial violence upon people of color. To have the Red Dress Lodge in such a highly trafficked place as the Common frequently is to carve out visibility and shed much needed light on the atrocities of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. We are in a time of great change making and culture creating. I deeply need to live in a culture where my people are welcomed into their rightful place as human beings, not as the subhumans they have been treated as. And as the world churns with protests screaming for and demanding justice, rightful justice, the installation of the Red Dress Lodge will stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and call to awareness for the multiple layers of justice that must be engaged. To have the Red Dress Lodge on the Commons is a direct action of reclamation through care. Next slide, please. This installation consists of one lodge that will be installed in the traditional way, guided through my people and the teachings of my crew. I am unable to share with you the details of those teachings because there are protocols around sharing them with non-Indigenous people. Originally, this installation was going to consist of 4 lodge structures that represent many layers within Indigenous life that point to place, location, time, and race. But due to COVID, the installation adjusted into the form of one lodge, which seems to mirror how colonialism and plagues are continually asking Indigenous people to shrink into the past towards non-existence. I have left the original proposal visible to reiterate this dynamic. The lodge poles will be anchored into the ground as traditionally directed, and the lodge will be covered by the tapestry of red dresses. To reiterate, for Indigenous people, the red dress symbolizes a female relative that has become the victim of colonial violence. The significance for me to facilitate the creation of such a tapestry is to further reclaim visual space and reiterate that Indigenous people are still here, and we are still fighting against genocide. The lodge will be in conversation and relationship to a wooden sculpture that will sit 4 feet away. This sculpture represents our relatives of fire, wood, and stone, and the importance of their presence in our healing. This sculpture is articulated by the red spiral of blood representing the blood of our lost relatives to colonial violence. The installation will abide by social distance guidelines and will have 4 people, including myself, present to build the installation on site. 1 extra person will be present to install the 5 associated signs for the installation. All lodge poles and signs will be placed into the ground at 5 to 6 inch depth and reinforced with stakes. My crew will be wearing masks and gloves during this installation. The 3 members of my crew and I have been in a, quote, germ bubble. That's like a thing I've been hearing people say. In a germ bubble since COVID began, preparing to work together without putting ourselves and others at risk for contracting COVID. And as far as vandalism is concerned, we have selected community members to check on and report on the installation weekly. If there should be any tears to the tapestry, we have mending measures in place where myself or other crew members are able to come and mend the tapestry. Any holes that are made, tears, etc. I know the squirrels in the comments are really friendly. So however, if the items on the tapestry should be removed, say a feather or a ribbon, that item will not be mended until the installation has been taken down. If the integrity of the installation should be compromised by vandalism to the point where it can't stand properly, we will be deinstalling immediately, not reinstalling again. The sculpture will be unable to be disassembled because the stones are epoxied in, and the spectators will not be able to move it because it will be anchored to the ground, and it's a big piece of wood. The installation and deinstallation will be largely similar in that the build will begin with a ceremonial blessing between me and my crew members of the land and the materials, and end in a ceremonial closing. The installation will not be made public spectacle, as my build team and I will be deep in prayer and thought around the meaning of this installation and our lost relatives. Also, to kind of mirror the fact that Indigenous people, we keep going on regardless of the invisibility. We estimate that the installation will take around 6 to 8 hours. Our permit says from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. The deinstallation will be a little bit more publicly open, COVID pending, in that more members of the local tribes will be present to witness and offer songs. The deinstallation will feel a little more like a memorial service than the installation will. The deinstallation process will also take around 6 to 8 hours, we are estimating. And since we are building with traditional techniques, we will not be using any power tools or tools of the like. No electricity, nothing like that. And in closing, I am an Indigenous guest on these lands, and it was important for me to publicly engage Indigenous protocol by asking the Massachusetts tribe for permission to build such an installation before asking the permission of any other organization. The Massachusetts tribe and the surrounding tribes are the most important permissions for public art on these lands. And I again encourage all people engaging in public art to shift colonial bureaucracies to center local Indigenous tribes. The construction of this installation is guided by my traditions and overseen by the Massachusetts tribe with consultations from members of the Nipmuc Nation, Lenape Nation, Pocasset Ponkanoket Nation, Narragansett tribe, Wampanoag tribe, and Blackfoot Nation from Canada. And I apologize if I said any of those incorrectly. I am humbled to have this opportunity to install this piece that speaks to Indigenous healing and visibility in the commons, a place that has been ground zero for colonial violence for centuries. I am grateful for the space and opportunity to bring into view the reality of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls into such a colonial space that thrives on Indigenous erasure. I hope that this installation creates space for change and healing for my people. I end with offering my deep gratitude to all who have participated in supporting Misko Dudoswan's creation. Chimagwich, Nikaningina. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We'll begin with some questions from the commissioners. Are there any questions from commissioners about the piece?
Well, I have a question, and thank you so much for your presentation. It was lovely, and I learned so much. This is Aqua. What exactly will I see at the site of this installation? I wasn't sure what aspect of the photograph and the diagrams I would actually see if I were to come upon this installation.
Right, and this is the tricky part because for my tradition, sharing photographs and drawings of a lodge is not okay. So I appreciate you all working with me on that. When you approach, you will see a dome that's red.
Mm-hmm.
And as you get closer, it will look like a tapestry with the shape of red dresses and decals such as turkey feathers, ribbons. There might be some animal teeth and things like that.
I see.
And then 4 feet away will be a pine centerpiece that's around, I think it's like 2.5, 3 feet in diameter. And in the center, it is carved, and there are 4 stones, like sizable stones in the center that have been epoxied in.
Okay.
And then there'll be 4 signs surrounding the lodge that will have information about MMIW and colonialism's violence. And then there'll be a larger sign at the quote unquote entrance, even though there's not really an entrance, that will have general information and also information about links and resources.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you maybe just expand a little bit on the nature of the dome itself, how it's, you mentioned something a little bit about the wooden pieces and the stakes. Is it fully enclosed or is it open to the air?
Yeah. No. So the stakes go into the ground.
Yep.
And I'm trying to figure out how to explain without sharing teachings. It's, let's see, it's a wooden dome with 8 saplings that create the vertical structure, and then horizontally there will be 4 saplings that wrap around, and the tapestry will completely cover, and will be, so I'll be hand sewing to every single sapling, and then tacking into the ground with stakes. So there's no, unless an animal decides to dig under and get in, there'll be no
There's
entrance.
no doorway entrance. So.
No doorway.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the diagrams you show imply that there's people inside it. Is that true?
Oh, really? Could you go backwards for me, please?
As the bigger circle. So those are the 4-foot diameter inside the piece.
Yes. That's just how big the lodge is.
Oh, so the red circle is not the lodge.
No, sorry.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry.
So the red circle represents the
That's
total
the lodge.
space the installation will take.
The 4-foot diameter is the lodge. The 3-foot diameter is the piece of wood. Okay, thank you very much. I was very unclear on that, but now I understand. I guess I got confused because the red color and the red dress, I suddenly merged.
That makes sense.
I thought you were doing a very big dome. That'll be your next project, much larger.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, are there other questions from other commissioners?
It sounds as if the installation and the deinstallation are a big part of the project. Do you hope to engage audiences in both?
For the installation, no, because I will be deep in ceremony, so I won't be speaking to anybody. I do anticipate people watching and standing. I am thinking about ways to let people know what's happening without getting too close and abiding by social distance guidelines. So I'm thinking about having a little sign that says what's happening, make sure you're social distancing. If you want to know more, I have a webpage about the installation. So that's kind of one thing I'm thinking about.
Thank you.
And same for deinstallation.
So the deinstallation, I anticipate more people will be present to watch it being taken down. And there will be a little more engagement depending on what's going on with COVID. Will depend on, you know, how we're going to structure ourselves. But I have been talking to other members of the local tribes about doing a witnessing, essentially, which is where there'll be a handful of people present and we will be singing songs as we take the installation down. Because, sorry?
No, go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say that what's true for me, and I think for the people that are working with me, this installation is actually a living being. So we'll be engaging with it like it's a living being.
So my question, I think this is a great project. I'm very impressed by how much you pulled together by all these different entities. And it seems like very much a project of healing.
Yeah.
And I think it has other spiritual and emotional attributes. But could you talk a little bit about the art of it? Why is it an artwork?
That's a great question. I think that's, I don't ever think about it separately, because for me and for my teachings and what I've been taught by my elders is that ceremony and art are not separate. So I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I think possibly one of the aspects that makes it art is the dresses and how each dress is going to be decorated differently and have personal meaning, but also an artistic expression.
Right, and I like your answer that art and ceremony are one.
Yeah.
I think that's what I would say about it myself. Are there any other comments? I was just going to add one, that I think that the message is as profound as perhaps more profound than the actual artifact. So communicating that message as much as possible, you know, within the constraints of what you're allowed to communicate based on your beliefs, seems to me of one of the values of the, you know, putting it in a public space is to help people learn. So yeah. the more your website, or the more even the presence of signage that tells people to be respectful, but to also understand, I think would be of, you know, the kind of the interpretation of this is in our minds very important too.
I have one last question. You mentioned a couple of times that there might be a handful of people there, Lily. What is your invitation to the community at large to participate, whether it's virtually or a knowledge-based invitation? Like, how will the community become a part of this or access this culture that you're sharing in your plan?
I'm honestly waiting to hear from the Parks Department about what will be allowed in terms of public access to this and a sort of event. And I think the other component I'm working with is the silence and invisibility, and focusing on installing it without a big to-do and de-installing it without a big to-do, to really kind of show the essence of I'm really struggling with this, actually. Yeah.
Hey,
Who's, sorry?
Daniel Strongwalker.
Oh, this is my community partner with Gia. Yeah, please step in.
Hey, hi. Not that you needed me. So goal to everybody. Hello. My name is Daniel Strongwalker Thomas. I'm the Chief Servant Leader of the Global Initiative for Indigenous Advancement. You know us nonprofits love our acronyms. It's GIIA. We're very proud to be a part of this. Please forgive me. I got my wisdom teeth removed the other day, so I look a little different. So thank you. Community participation in this is something that the normal community would not see. When we talk about our Massachusetts community as a whole, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, all of the many races that make up our great state, this is something they would never see. This is something that they would have to be invited to. This is something that they'd have to know someone deep within our community to come see how this is erected and put up. So part of the participation is doing it in front of everybody, not hiding. I heard one of our elders say, 2020, no more secrets. And part of this is us coming out too and expressing to the larger community how they can participate by witnessing, by silently witnessing. Mm-hmm. And then on Lily's website that she's in the middle of creating, being able to comment, ask questions, interact. Because at the end of this is truly a chance to educate, to connect, and to build some terrific bridges that either were already built and just needed a little bit more repair, or building some that weren't there to begin with. So we are very grateful for the conversation to be putting this piece up, you know, and I have a long, deep history here in Boston. My family has served in the arts and industry here. I am an adopted child of the Nessens, so that means Peter Nesson and Fifi Nesson are family members. So I appreciate totally what the Boston Art Commission's been doing for many, many years, and the Friends of the Parks, which Fifi is a big part of. So thank you so much for your time, and I can tell that you have really dedicated yourselves to allowing us this opportunity to present. So thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah. And I hope that the Parks Department is able to offer you some parameters so that you can make that invitation for silent witnessing and have people come out who, you know, this will be a beautiful and exceptional thing that they're going to be witnessing for the first time.
Yeah, me too. And hopefully we won't have to stand 6 feet apart. And we'll be able to invite more people to the deinstallation, which I anticipate to be a very powerful thing. We're going to be saying like a good night to a relative, which will be this lodge.
Okay, sorry, just given time, and I don't want to lose our quorum here. I wanted to make a moment for any public commentary. There doesn't need to be any if there isn't some out there, but if there's somebody who wants to make a comment or ask a question, you'd be welcome to do so now. And then we'll move to a vote. Tricia, are there any?
So I don't see any hands raised, but Emma, who commented briefly at the beginning of the meeting, did message me before she left the meeting that she wanted to offer her support for this project, stating, at the time of public reckoning with this country's legacies and contemporary realities of racial violence, this work's intent to bring visibility to the stories of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people is extremely important. I also think that the project has great potential to spark greater awareness of and dialogue around Indigenous. Sorry, there's more. Experiences and presence in the region. I urge the city and the commission to move forward with the project.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for the presentation and for public comment. Why don't we move to the vote? And I'd like to call for a motion.
I will make a motion that we give design approval to this project for transformative art
I'll second the motion.
Okay, and I will read off names in order for you to vote. So I will vote first as a yes. Equa,
Yes, A for Equa.
Camilo has left. Michael?
Yes.
Cara?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Bob?
Enthusiastic, yes.
And Lisa?
Yes.
Wonderful. So unanimously it passes. The resolution is adopted.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Lily, for your presentation and for your thoughtfulness.
Thank you all so much for the case.
We look forward to learning more about it.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you. So I think, Karen, we're not going to cover, is that correct? We're not going to cover Edge 42, but we've sent out, I believe, a letter that everybody has had about the artist changing directions. And I don't think there's anything that we have to vote on in that regard. So
right. I can share the letter and we can go over that at our next meeting. I think he'd like to come back in July, if it's okay with everyone.
Sure.
Okay with me.
Okay.
Okay, we'll bring him back.
And then you said there's one more agenda item that Lisa wants to.
So, sorry, everyone. I just don't want to belabor this point, but I really, what I'm hearing in between the lines is that I really want to try to see if we can move the embrace along and go back to the MOU conversation, because I think maybe we could solve it if we made a motion. What would you guys think if we made a motion to the following, where we say, we make a motion to grant Karen Goodfellow, the director of the Boston Arts Commission, the authority to enter into an MOU that recognizes the fundraising limit of $1 million that the Boston Fund is raising for the Embrace. The BAC enters this MOU, but has additional questions, including but not limited to the structure of the Boston Foundation Fund, the relationship between the artwork and maintenance plan and how it's covered, intellectual property, among others. The BAC will be convening a special meeting to address these concerns. Because we can't get all the answers. We need to move things along so that someone can sign and we demonstrate good faith to the Boston Foundation that we want to do this.
So I have only one thing that stood out to me, Lisa, and that was, you said a limit of $1 million, and hearkening back to something that Michael said, it should be $1 million.
Okay, fine. We can say it recognizes their fundraising of $1 million, or their raising of $1 million to go for the Embrace.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. What do you other commissioners think?
I mean, Lisa, I understand that at some point we do need to, and I have all the confidence in Karen moving forward and signing this. I still come back to I just feel that we're being pressured into accepting this amount. And that's the piece that's been troubling me since I read Karen's email earlier today. But I agree that we don't necessarily have room to move. I mean, part of me wonders, where did they come up with that figure? Was it based on something? Was it just pulled out of the air and say, okay, we're going to say $1 million? And if I had more confidence that it was based on something, then I can understand. But I also agree, I see where you're coming from, that we really don't have much room to maneuver here. And that sort of troubles me, that we've been put in this situation that I don't see that we've ever been put in this situation like that. So I'm prepared to move this forward with some reservations. And I think you've all heard where I'm coming from, but I understand, Lisa, that we're sort of bound by to get this thing finished.
So is there, Mark?
I think Mark had to recuse himself.
I'm recused from this.
Oh, I keep forgetting that. I'm sorry. Are there any other comments on this motion as Lisa read it, with the one change of making it not a limit of 1 million, but making it $1 million toward the maintenance of the embrace.
I can live with that. I'm just frustrated that Nyla was in and out of the conversation, and there's so many difficult parts to this conversation that I hope I'm voting in the right direction with the limited information that I think I gathered from it. And I understand Lisa's frustration, and I think Lisa's motion is a good one, and I certainly would vote for it.
Mm-hmm. So can I get a second on Lisa's motion then?
I would second it.
All right, so doing a roll call here for, I'll start with you, George.
Yes.
Yes, for George. Bob?
Yes.
Lisa? Well, it was your motion.
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes, with reservations.
Okay, who else is here? I think that's everybody, and I for me, so I think the motion carries. And hopefully this is a good start in the right direction. With these questions that we have, I think we'll all feel more comfortable once many of them are answered. But you know, we have confidence in Karen's ability to look out for the issues of the commission as she looks at these documents.
Agreed.
So.
Thanks, everyone. And I also think an MOU at the end of the day is a memorandum of understanding. This is not like a contract.
Right.
So it's just demonstrating to them that we believe in what they're doing and we want to get it up in the common. That's the end goal.
Yeah, and I would also just add that just to reiterate this, and we can talk about it more in detail when we try to answer some of the specific questions that came up today that are all really good questions, that the BAC still has regulatory approval over every aspect of this project. So I totally hear and understand and agree that signing on to a fundraising amount or a maintenance amount without knowing details about the maintenance is not ideal. But there's still, we still have total control over every aspect of the detail of how that works, what kind of fund it is, what kind of access we think we need to have on it, how the design continues, final approval, what the maintenance plan has to include, and all of those things. So I look forward to continuing that conversation and making sure that we're answering all of those questions as best we can. Is it possible
to let the foundation know that we have concerns about the dollar amount that they're sort of imposing on this? And
yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely possible, and I would say we could do that informally, or we could do that more formally if there's something that the BAC wants to put together offline and sign and send. Kind of anything along that spectrum is possible.
Or like a signing statement.
Or do you feel because there's already a good relationship between Kara, Karen, and the BAC that they have, an informal conversation that says, we're doing this in good faith, guys. We really want to work together. We have some concerns, and it's a friendly conversation. I don't know, just a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing we can think about is talking to them about their ongoing relationship with this project going forward, right? So if the $1 million gets used up, this is going to be an important piece that they may need a fundraising cap right now for what they're doing, but they may be interested in partnering and doing more fundraising in the future. And I think we want to leave room for that. I know we're well over time, and we just made that motion and that vote. We had one last project through our public art and design application. I would just ask you to vote. We've reviewed it in conversation with the Commission for Persons with Disabilities. It's a painting on a sidewalk in Rosendale. I would ask that we review it favorably. It is, very straightforward. We've had, I think, people on the line for this project, so I'd love to be able to tell them to move forward. It's a very straightforward project where there are paintings on a section of the sidewalk, but they are not, their section's already marked off by trees. So it doesn't impede accessibility in any way. So I would ask the Playful Pools by Laura Denoto Wyatt be considered for your approval.
So could I have a motion to approve this project?
Karen, one question. What's the time frame?
Sarah, can you pull up? Do you guys remember what the dates are?
We can begin as soon as we have approval, and time frame for the artist is 3 to 4 weeks to complete the murals.
And how long will it be up?
Due to the fact that it's on a horizontal surface, we recognize that it's not going to be up more than 2 years, probably 18 months to 2 years before it's worn, and we consider the space for something else.
Is this going right in front of the Wallpaper City? Is that where this is being located?
It is adjacent to Wallpaper City.
And are you aware that they are approvals to expand? Does that affect the installation at all?
We're aware of their approvals to expand their building, but we do not believe that the painting will interfere with that or vice versa.
Okay.
And
okay, so are there any last questions, or can we have a motion on the floor? Lisa, you look like you want to do
Great. I move that we move forward with the proposal put forth by the Playful, what's the group's name again? Pools.
Cool.
Thank you.
The group is Rosendale Village Main Street. Playful Pools is the title by the artist.
By Roslindale Streets.
Main Streets.
Main Streets, Playful Pools.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay, great. All those in favor? Aqua?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Makara?
Yes.
George?
Aye.
Bob?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
And I'm an aye as well. So unanimously passes. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Last order of business would then be an adjournment of the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All those in favor, raise your hands and sign off. Okay, thank you.